Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Shattering the Illusion conference. I'm Joe Murray. My website is freedomforall.online. And I am a hip hop artist, what people will call a conscious hip hop artist, but I just refer to myself as a real MC who speaks about real shit, shit that actually matters, like truth and freedom and exposing the criminality and illegitimacy of government. But I'm also a music producer, podcast host, and co-organizer of this amazing conference alongside my good buddy James Cordiner from freeyourmindne.com. So huge shout out to James and all of the speakers for their amazing work and contributions towards this conference. I am honored to personally know these individuals and to have become good friends with some of them. These are the true warriors on the front lines of this battle for our freedom and for our very souls. Make no mistake about it. So before I get into my talk, let me just let you guys know right off the bat that I do swear a lot and get pretty intense. Some say that turns people off, but in all honesty, I don't give a fuck. This is my style. This is how I talk. I'm going to be me and keep it real with you guys. So put your big boy pants on or big girl pants on and check out what I have to say or don't. No one's forcing you to watch me. You could turn this off and tune back in later, if you emotionally can't handle certain words. But now's your chance. But I want to first start by telling you guys a little bit more about myself. I'm someone who's always been awake or aware to a good extent to the fact that the world is fucked up, right? Like that there is something really off here. And I just had this intuitive sense that this wasn't the way things could be or should be here, and that there was way more to life than what we were experiencing. And, the way society operated just made no fucking sense to me. And I always had trouble conforming to the so-called norms. I'd see the world live in this programmed, mundane, routine daily life that I really just didn't want to take part in, especially as a kid. I just wanted to be able to explore my imagination and creativity more and pursue the things that I took interest in, like music and art. Which instead, the majority of my time, I was being forced to attend the fucking bland marble halls of the public school system, which I dreaded from day one. Just a very unnatural, depressing setting to be forced in throughout the formative years of a child's life, which, please don't get me started. I could do a whole presentation on the public school system and how it's actually modeled after the Prussian indoctrination system in the West, but I digress. I was always a very deep thinker and always had an open mind and was always wondering, like, what else was out there in the cosmos and, like, where the hell are we? What are we? Why are we? What's it all about? And this is at a very young age I'm talking about, like as young as I can remember. And I felt like not everyone thought like this. And why can't I just go along with everything like everyone else does or take interest in the shit that most people do? Like, I'd watch people's ability to make small talk and conversate about nothing, with any true meaning or depth to it. And, I would feel like something was wrong with me for not being able to do so or for feeling this way. So I never went along with the rest of the herd, and I became very rebellious towards authority figures the older I got, because the way I felt about everything, started manifesting as anger, frustration, depression and anxiety, from this yearning within me of wanting a deeper understanding of things and not getting answers. And it wasn't until my early 20s, back in 2008, I believe, where I wound up watching a couple of documentaries, one of them being Zeitgeist, which they made a couple of Zeitgeist, but I only saw the first one, which was an absolutely excellent documentary that came out back in 2007, I believe. And it was responsible for waking up a lot of people. But it starts off getting into the origins of Christianity, and it shows how all of these belief systems which predate Christianity are absolutely identical, and how it's all based on astral theology and sun worship, personified as characters, which, even though I always had an open mind, this was challenging for me being raised a Roman Catholic, with the typical Italian-American traditions. And then they get into 9/11 and show how it was, in fact, a massive false flag attack, an inside job perpetrated by elements within the United States government with the assistance of rogue elements and intelligence agencies and other Western governments, and just completely demolished the official story of that day. It's honestly an insult to our intelligence. It's fucking laughable, in a sense, how poor the official narrative actually is of that day. Which I'm sure many of you watching this know by now, so I'm not going to get into any details of the shit that really went down that day. But, they get into the reasons why Western governments would stage such an event, which false flags are a known thing. It's an age-old tactic used by governments throughout history. It's problem, reaction, solution, as the great David Icke puts it. Those in control wish to attain more control covertly, right? They're not just going to come out and state what their agenda is, because a good portion of people would resist. So they covertly create a problem, like a false flag terror attack, 9/11, prime example. They then wait for the public's reaction, which is always, oh my God, what are they going to do about it? This is terrible, meaning government. Then they offer the pre-planned solution to the problem that they manufactured and transform society in their favor by further restricting people's freedom and privacy and acquiring more control, more power, right? All under the guise of protecting people from what they've been manipulated to fear. And look how much freedom was lost after 9/11 through the Patriot Act, which is the most unpatriotic, totalitarian piece of garbage legislation ever passed. We got the TSA at the airports having us all line up like fucking cattle and being patted down and put through full body scanners, which, by the way, they haven't stopped one terrorist since their inception, which we throw fucking billions of dollars of taxpayer money at each year. We got the NSA listening to our phone calls and reading emails, which all came out. It's no theory. And, just like the gigantic false flag we've all experienced the past 2.5 years with the scamdemic, the most blatant of all false flags, in my opinion. And look at all the tyranny that was justified under the guise of a sickness with a 99% survival rate on average. Worldwide tyranny on a scale we never witnessed before. Lockdowns, checkpoints, curfews, mandates, forced injections. Absolute insanity, which never forget, by the way, never forget what these people did. But I digress. So then this documentary gets into the New World Order agenda and the microchip agenda and starts naming names such as the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. And then they get into the Federal Reserve and how this fraudulent monetary system is structured and how it really works and how it's, a debt-based fiat currency slavery system, essentially. And this blew my fucking mind. And it was a moment of realization for me that, wow, I wasn't fucking crazy. I always knew something was seriously wrong with our world. This makes sense to me. Powerful people with the money and the resources who, own or are capable of manipulating the major media outlets and can influence politicians, they have an agenda for more control, more power, more resources. I mean, is that really that hard to accept? Most people will acknowledge that shit like this goes on, but have no idea how deep and dark it actually goes and to what ends these people will go to achieve their agendas. But it put things into perspective for me enough to where I was like, okay, so this is why the world is the way that it is. This is why certain changes in society are coming about. This is why people believe these certain things and support these certain ideas. And this is why society operates in this manner. We've been fucking bamboozled. We've been bullshitted. We've been deceived and we're being controlled here. And this sparked a flame within me, a hunger to know more and get to the bottom of what the fuck was really going on. If we were lied to about things such as 9/11, then what the fuck else have we been lied to about? How far back does this manipulation and deception actually go? Who or what is ultimately behind all this? And what's the ultimate goal here? And what the fuck can I do about it? And this led me to going down every rabbit hole imaginable. From alternative versions of history to symbolism to astrotheology and the origins of religions, secret societies, the whole ET rabbit hole, consciousness and the metaphysical universe. And it's like pulling on a thread, and you keep pulling more and more to get to the end of it. And, you just watch this whole shit come undone. And you realize the scale that we've been lied to on, which, we've been lied to about just about damn near everything for as far back as we can look into history. But, this was for like a good 8-9 years solid out of like the 14 going on 15 years that I've been consciously aware of, the things that are going on. 8 or 9 years solid of me just keeping my head down these rabbit holes and trying to, aggregate all this information and make sense out of everything, which, there is an abundance of truth in each of these areas, and they all interconnect, and there's a lot of important information that you need to take in to see how everything interconnects and to understand the level of deception. But for the most part, it's a massive distraction. And I'm not even suggesting that it is intentionally. But the fact of the matter is that it deviates us from actually focusing on the things that we should be focusing on and taking the actions that we should be taking. Focusing on the truths that actually matter and actual practical solutions that we could individually implement, which they don't want you to understand. So the reason for me bringing all this up is because, most people in the freedom movement, truth movement, whatever you want to call it, or even some of you tuning in today, upon waking up to, the lies that we've been sold, become very distracted with all the rabbit holes to go down. And you try to pull others down there as well and wind up becoming so confused and overwhelmed about what's actually going on and what the true solutions are, that you lose sight. And I'm saying that we should just have a good generalization of what is actually taking place in the world, right? Just a good generalization of the agendas that's unfolding and, the depths of deception. The fine details aren't important, because I'm telling you, I've been looking into all this and talking about all this shit for the past 14, 15 years now. And I watched the majority of the truth community do the same as the world deteriorated further into chaos and tyranny. Because we're focusing on the 5 sense reality of names, dates, and places and events. Right? We're focusing on the screen where reality is being projected onto. And we're pointing at the screen and yelling at the screen at the movie, and we're trying to rearrange what has already been manifested instead of going to where our reality is being projected from and changing the reels to then project and manifest a different reality, the one we say we want. And that projection room is here and also here. The goal we say we want to achieve is freedom, right? We just want to be left the fuck alone from these power-hungry, parasitic psychopaths in control, with their dumbass agenda that we want no part of, or we just want to be left alone from anybody, right? We just want to be left alone to live our lives in peace and make an honest living, take care of our families, and be able to enjoy, our time with our family and friends, and have the liberty to experience ourselves to our fullest potential without people harassing, extorting, or coercing us into anything, right? Freedom is the goal. But what is true freedom? And how do we attain that freedom? Are there requirements that need to be met for the manifestation of that freedom? And I'm here to tell you that there most certainly are. Most people in this community jump the gun and want to put the cart before the horse, because they see what's going on and say, oh, okay, all right, we need to get off the grid. We need off-grid communities. We need our own currency. We need parallel economies. We need our own sources of energy, free energy, which all of that is fantastic. I'm not saying we shouldn't strive to attain those things. But what I'm saying is that it is an impossibility to acquire those things and manifest that kind of freedom in any significant way in this world and have it sustain itself without us first uniting on the core principles of freedom, which act as the cement, that the foundation, the very idea of individual liberty and inherent sovereignty stands upon, which must be understood here and in here in order for us to individually generate true freedom. This is why the title for my talk today is called The Foundation of Freedom. And I want to dedicate this talk today to this little girl right here. The love of my life, my heart and soul, my daughter Gianna. See, I serve the Creator first and foremost by serving the truth and fighting for freedom for its creation here. But right after that, it's for her and those like her. But she will know that her father fought for her freedom and had the courage to stand in the face of unbelievable censorship and tyranny worldwide and call shit out for what it is. And do so in style, too. Straight up not giving a fuck. So, as John Locke said, the natural liberty of man is to be free of any superior power on earth, and not to be under the authority of man, but only to have the law of nature for his rule. And I'm going to get into what those laws of nature are and how they function. Most people in what's considered the freedom movement fall short of an actual understanding of what true freedom is. You know, you hear everyone spout freedom, liberty, and rights loosely, but they lack the understanding of what those terms objectively mean. So what are rights, truly and objectively? Where do they come from? How do we define true freedom? And therefore, what should actually be considered violations of our freedom and conditions of slavery? These are the real questions that most freedom advocates do not possess definitive answers to, and thus have no solid stance or positions on their arguments for freedom. If you were to do a social experiment and ask random people on the streets, or even those in the freedom community, to define what freedom means to them, you would receive a variety of different opinions. Right? And if you also in that same experiment were to ask the same individuals to define what a human right is and where rights come from, again, you'd receive a mixed bag, with many not even believing in the very concept of rights, thinking that rights are just constructs in the minds of human beings. A lot of people in the freedom community actually believe this, when the truth of the matter is that there are objective answers that we can discover which do not waver based on the perceptions and belief systems of others. Now, this is a quote I heard in a Mark Passio presentation, which he said he heard from a TV series, but it's so powerful. I had someone look it up for me to find out what TV series it was actually from, and it was from the TV series Revenge, which came out, I think, back in 2011. Simple quote, but it's very powerful. The biggest fear is that the truth is absolute. Humanity's biggest fear is that the truth is absolute. Ain't that the fucking truth? So how could we be advocates for freedom while not actually knowing definitively what true freedom actually is? And why it is objectively right for us to live free from violence and coercion, and what actually constitutes violence and coercion? How can we be claiming to be fighting for the same goal to be accomplished when we're not united on what that goal truly is? You know, most people's idea of freedom is based on their opinion of what actions they believe human beings should be able to exercise openly, devoid of coercive intervention, while advocating what actions they believe human beings should be forced to exercise, what political decrees they should be forced to comply with, and what programs and services they should be compelled to fund. And this is due to the fact that the majority of people who claim they are proponents of freedom are, as a matter of fact, supporters of slavery in some form or fashion, unknowingly, but mostly willfully ignorant of that truth. Most people proclaim to want liberty and justice, but when faced with the immutable, objective truth of what each of those actually entail and require, they are loath to accept it, and they defensively reject it upon even realizing that they themselves may be to blame for contributing to the loss of human freedom in the world due to their participation and support for the belief systems and institutions that are responsible for the destruction of our liberty. You know, the truth is an extremely tough pill to swallow for most. And this is a quote from the great Mark Passio, from whom I learned so much from. The truth, by its very nature, is belligerent because it wages war against all forms of mind control. Absolutely. So first and foremost, we have to establish the fact that truth does exist. Okay, especially in regards to rights and freedom. And it is objective, meaning that it's not subjective and up to human beings to arbitrarily just decide based upon their likes, whims, and preferences. The truth exists independently of our perceptions and sits immutable to be discovered and have our perceptions aligned to. Honestly, this needs to be stated because most people, believe it or not, don't believe there's actually a such thing as objective truth. You know, there are many people who believe that truth is subjective. I mean, look at the lunatics on the left who think they could just be anything they want, any sex, any animal, whatever. It's just up to their subjective whim. You know, and everyone else has to just go along with it. You know, and there's a lot of solipsists who believe that their truth is the only truth. And even a lot of you watching right now who believe that you are awake and that you've taken in the truth in its totality on everything that's going on, right? Yet will insist to refuse and oppose the core principles of freedom when explained to you and say, oh, no, that's not true. And you need this. And you don't know what you're talking about. You know, that's your opinion. When none of what I'm going to be talking about today is my opinion or a belief system. These are objective truths, objective principles that must be understood. First and foremost, before we even begin to fight for true freedom. And I say the reason why people in the freedom community or spiritual community or conspiracy community, you know, people who have woken up to some truths or even a lot of truths, the reason they still fall short of an understanding of the core principles that I'm talking about, you know, and haven't accepted the truth yet in its totality in regards to rights and freedom and the principles of freedom, is because there's still brain imbalance in one hemisphere or the other in these individuals that they haven't resolved. They're still under some form of mind control and still have, you know, suffer from brain imbalance, which leads to these poisoned worldviews. So if you're looking at the slide, it's as if the brain is facing you. That's why I put the right side on the left and the left side on the right. But let me first explain the functions of the right and left hemispheres of the brain. The right hemisphere is considered the feminine aspect of human consciousness, which both sexes have both masculine and feminine aspect to their consciousness. But the right hemisphere of the brain deals with more of that feminine energy with care, compassion, creativity, empathy, you know, feeling the sense of connection to everyone and everything, you know, that connection to spirit. When the left hemisphere, the masculine aspect of consciousness, deals with logic, reason, you know, it's the intellect dealing with the five sense reality, and it's action-based, that masculine energy of action. And these two aspects of consciousness need to be wed to form a balanced worldview. So most people in the freedom community are still, from the brainwashing and bamboozlement, they are still under some form of mind control, imbalanced in one hemisphere more than the other, which the controllers of the world don't give a fuck which side you're more imbalanced towards, as long as you're imbalanced and not centered and don't have a holistic worldview. So the more right brain imbalanced tend to have blind belief, tend to be pacifist, and believe that the spiritual world is all that matters and it takes precedence over the physical world, and or it's about, it's all about some hereafter, or have extreme religious beliefs and think that everything has been preordained by God. Then the more left brain imbalance tend to be rigidly skeptic. They are immersed in the five sense reality with atheistic worldviews, and therefore don't believe that there's anything to consciousness and true spirituality, and, don't believe in objective morality because they don't believe in a higher intelligence that set a behavioral standard in existence for human beings to adhere to. So, first of all, both worldviews leave out free will. The right brain imbalanced, who believe that everything has been preordained by God and it doesn't matter what you do here because it's just about some hereafter. And the left brain imbalanced, who believe that human beings are like machines and the universe is like dead mechanized clockwork. Therefore, free will doesn't exist. So they both reject free will and an understanding of objective truth, of reality itself. So again, we need a healthy balance between both hemispheres of the brain, with true care, compassion, and an understanding of true spirituality, consciousness and the metaphysical universe, the real science of reality and how consciousness impacts reality, but have our feet planted firmly on the ground, using logic and reason and having a healthy amount of skepticism. But a lot of people are still imbalanced and they are stuck in these worldviews. And at the end of the day, the majority of human beings will only accept half-truths at best and will adjust them to fit accordingly with their worldviews and programmed preconceived belief systems. And this is a quote from a dude named Travis Walton. He's an alleged UFO abductee. I'm not saying I believe his story or that you should. I just heard this quote from him, and it's very powerful and true. He said, "I've come to the realization that the biggest problem anywhere in the world is that people's perceptions of reality are compulsively filtered through the screening mesh of what they want and do not want to be true." Wow. Wow, ain't that true? Then we wonder why the world is the way that it is, when the bulk of humanity refuses to accept and lives in opposition to truth itself. This is why in my work, again, I stress the fact that we could talk about the five sense reality of names, dates, places, events, connections, all we want to the end of time as the world continues to free fall into a totalitarian hell, because we're just focusing on the screen, the movie that's being projected, and we're raising our fist and screaming at the screen where everything's playing out instead of getting to where our reality is being projected from. Changing the reels by aligning ourselves to these inherent universal truths that must be integrated into our being, and thus transforming our hearts and minds individually to then generate the change that the world so desperately needs. So let's demystify what truth is, because just as mostly everything else, people tend to overcomplicate the meaning. The truth is simply that which is. It is that which has occurred and is occurring. That's all the truth consists of. I mean, you could take it as far as to say every individual and collective act produces a truth, which, though the consequences of those acts may be altered after the fact, the acts themselves cannot ever be undone and have been set into the record of time in the universe of that which has occurred. Can anyone honestly disagree with that? Now, also, woven into the very fabric of our reality exists inherent, universal, non-man-made, binding, and immutable truths which have been in existence for as long as the universe has existed and will continue to exist until the end of time, such as the physical laws of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, momentum, etc. Right? Those are objective truths which are observable and discoverable, that don't waver based on another's perception or belief in their existence. They're true whether anyone knows it or not, understands it or not, or likes it or not, because human beings did not put those laws into existence. The universe or nature itself had manifested those laws into existence, which are to be discovered and understood by human beings in order for our optimal, benefit for existence. So point being is that objective truth exists. Again, it's sad that you have to state this, but unfortunately you do. And as Gandhi said, even if you're in the minority of one, the truth is still the truth. Now, with all that being established, we can now get to the heart of the matter. And this is where, the ego and cognitive dissonance, ignorance, and arrogance comes into play for most people. Also ingrained in reality itself exist objective truths which are revealed as a result of our actions, which manifest in nature. These truths are also observable and discoverable, though they are the more unseen laws of the universe. They're still observable and discoverable, and they act as the governing dynamics of human behavior. Meaning, if we behave a certain way, we produce a certain result in reality itself on the screen, right? Based on universal criteria of two modalities of behavior: right, moral action, or wrong, immoral action. Depending on the aggregate behavior of one of these modalities, either order and freedom will be generated, or chaos and slavery. It is literally as black and white as that. Freedom manifests as a result of moral behavioral laws adhered to. Freedom and morality are directly proportionate, whereas if the aggregate morality of a given society increases, freedom will increase. And if morality declines, freedom will decline. These are the laws by which we are collectively co-creating our shared experience as a species according to. We, as human beings, intelligent life, with the mental capacity capable of discovering objective morality, the definitive difference between right and wrong behavior, we are bound by these laws. Just as we are bound by the physical laws of nature, so are our behaviors bound by moral laws. Just as in all of existence, from the solar systems to the planets down to subatomic particles, how everything is governed by law, so are the behaviors of human beings. And mostly no one wants to hear or accept that that's how these dynamics work in nature. The actual physical manifestation of these inherent moral laws can be observed as such. If you were to take two separate population groups, right, population A and population B, and observe the aggregate behavior of each, you will note one of the two results. So say population A acted in the aggregate aligned to objective morality, right behavior, and did not accept nor tolerate opposition to objective morality, wrong behavior. That population group would produce a society which was orderly, harmonious with themselves and with nature, and would ultimately be free and prosperous. On the other hand, if population B were to act in opposition to objective morality in the aggregate by behaving immorally and by supporting immorality, that population group would produce a society which would be chaotic, out of balance with each other in nature, and would be enslaved and will destroy itself ultimately. The outcomes cannot be any other way due to law, inherent law, behavioral laws. And these laws go under the umbrella term which I and others refer to as natural law, aka moral law, spiritual law, God's law, or true karma, because real karma doesn't work in the way that most people believe it does in the spiritual community. And what natural law actually is, we're not talking about the law of the jungle here or having anything to do with the behavior of the animal kingdom. What natural law actually is, how we could correctly define natural law, is inherent behavioral laws of consequence, which govern the aggregate action of populations with the mental capacity capable of discovering objective morality. I know that's a lot, but I don't think I could break it down any more blunt and as simple as that. So I'm not talking about individual karma here or instantaneous karma. I'm talking about laws which govern the freedom of entire populations of intelligent beings. These are the laws of freedom. So now the question becomes, what is true objective morality? How do we define objective morality? Morality is the objective difference between right and wrong behavior. And this is pertaining to human beings. Again, let me keep stating this because, people are hard-headed and just want to hear what they want. And, people observe the way the animal kingdom behaves and assume that since that's the way they behave, then it's only natural that we behave similarly, which is utterly insane and ridiculous. And that's a very low level of consciousness to think like that. The objective standards of morality apply to beings of higher intelligence than the animal kingdom, who are mentally capable of discovering objectively right and wrong action and are capable of logic and reason, which the animals are not. The animal kingdom is not capable of doing that. So a right moral action for a human being to take would be any action which does not initiate aggression or violence onto other sentient beings, nor does it result in the theft or destruction of their property. Okay, rights are actions, and that is the correct objective definition of a human right. Any action which does not result in harm or loss to other sentient beings or their property. So we possess the inherent right as human beings to do as we please, as long as we do not initiate harm against other beings, which includes the violation of their property. Conversely, a wrongdoing, an immoral act, would be one which does initiate harm onto other sentient beings or results in the damage or theft of their property. Right and wrong behavior are inherent and objective due to the fact that the actions themselves, when taken, take place in nature, held to a universal moral standard which can be observed and recognized by human beings. Just ask yourself, if you were to see someone walking down a crowded street and just run up to a fucking random passerby and punch him in the nose, would that person have the right to do that? Well, of course not. Any sane mind would recognize that act as a wrongdoing. But why is it a wrongdoing? Is it wrong because we as a people have decided that such an action should be considered wrong at some point in the past, and then we set that standard of behavior for everyone else? Or is it wrong because Congress passed a law stating that physically assaulting another is bad and you should be held accountable for doing so? Or is the action itself inherently wrong? It's inherently wrong. And those actions can be observed and discovered and understood as the universal moral standards that human beings should be held to. So then, what force had put those objective truths into existence for us to discover? If it is inherent to nature, then the underlying intelligence behind the creation of nature, whatever you believe that force to be, put those truths into effect for human beings to discover and align our behaviors to, again, for our optimal benefit as a species. This is not a religious belief system being propagated. I'm just pointing out the obvious fact that right and wrong behavior manifest as objectively discoverable actions. Therefore, human beings did not create right and wrong. It is inherent to nature itself. Thus, the underlying driving force behind the creation of nature, has woven these truths into the fabric of our existence. Now, it's neither my duty to try to explain what that force may be and what I feel it is, or, any of my business to interfere with anyone's belief in that force, as long as it is understood that human beings are not the arbiters of right and wrong. Therefore, our rights do not come from human beings and can never be legitimately restricted or revoked by human beings when an objectively wrong action has not been conducted by us. No other man or woman can ever legitimately claim to grant or take away the rights of another. We are equal in birthrights, the right to perform actions which do not initiate aggression towards others. And yes, sentient beings, because as human beings with a higher brain function than the animal kingdom, capable of discovering the difference between harmful and non-harmful actions, should know better than to harm beings of lesser intelligence. As it is our natural birthright to do as we please as long as we don't initiate aggression onto others, we possess the right to defend ourselves when aggression is initiated upon us. And this does not constitute two wrongs not making a right, because you hear this shit all the time from people in the spiritual community or in the freedom movement. They say, oh, you can't fight violence with violence. That's what the system wants. You can't fight fire with fire, and two wrongs don't make a right. Bullshit. That is bullshit. Because the individual initiating the act of aggression always stands solely in the wrong, while the individual responding to the act of aggression with defensive force is exercising right action. Violence and defensive force are two different things. Violence is the initiation of physical aggression, which is the immoral usage of physical force for human beings. And self-defense, defensive force, is the moral usage of physical force. When someone initiates aggression onto another being, they violate the natural law right of that being to be left alone unharmed when they have not done any wrong. The act would be considered violence because it violates one's natural rights. It's in the very word. When the aggressed upon responds in defense, it is to be considered defensive force, not violence, because it is the moral usage of physical force for the protection and preservation of, that being's well-being or property, which they have every right to protect with whatever amount of physical force that is required to stop the act of aggression, up to deadly force if necessary, is possessed as an inherent natural birthright for all sentient beings. Again, this is another concept that most people struggle with accepting as objective truth. A lot of people have trouble accepting that we have the right to kill, not murder, that we have the right to justly take the life of another in defense of our life and property, or in the act of protecting, other innocents. If it's necessary to stop the act of violent aggression. Murder would be the unjust taking of another's life without right or just cause. We need to understand both sides of the one token of liberty, the non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle. The two pillars of enlightenment, which is we never have the right to go and initiate violence or coercion onto other sentient beings, yet we have the right to defend ourselves from violence and coercion. So this is considered the two pillars of enlightenment: non-aggression and self-defense, masculine and feminine, right brain and left brain. And, it needs to be wed and brought into balance, not taking one extreme over the other. A healthy balance needs to be made. And I'm not saying that you must defend yourself. You could be a pacifist. I wouldn't recommend it, but, you have the right to be shitted on if you want. But you have no right to advocate that others do the same, nor stand by as others be aggressed upon if you're physically capable of intervening and stopping, that immorality. That makes you a coward and immoral. But my motto is, and what should be the motto of all freedom lovers, is do no harm, but take no shit, regardless of who it's coming from. You'd see how much the world would change for the better if more people adopted that attitude. So now, under natural law, the moral laws of creation, every individual owns their body, the fruits of their labor, and that which they have rightfully acquired from others through mutual voluntary exchange. And no one possesses a higher claim over the life and property of another. Aggression and theft of another's life and lawful possessions under natural law I'm talking about should be considered violations of property rights. As we break down what is actually considered aggressive, immoral behavior under natural law for human beings, what the great public speaker Mark Passio refers to as the true 7 deadly sins, we can see one commonality these acts share. So these are the real, objectively wrongdoings that will result in harm or loss to another person or their property. So, number 1, murder, which is the unjust taking of another sentient being's life which did not belong to you, which you had no right to take. 2, assault, the taking of another's physical well-being, which you had no right to take. 3, rape, the taking of another's free will choice to sexually associate with whom they please, which you had no right to take from them. 4, theft of physical property, the taking of another's physical possessions which rightfully belong to them. 5, coercion, the taking of another's free will choice. 6, trespass, the taking away of someone's right to be left alone on their property, which they have rightfully established or acquired by forcefully entering their home or lair, which you had no right to take away from them. And 7 is willfully lying, taking away someone's ability to make correct, informed decisions by withholding valuable information. So, now what do each of these 7 natural law transgressions have in common? They're all a form of theft. They're all taking something from someone which you had no right to take. Right? So, in all actuality, natural law and objective morality could come down to just 2 words. Don't steal. Don't take which doesn't belong to you, and don't advocate the taking of that which does not belong to you. Most people innately understand this, right? But the issue is that they've been brainwashed and indoctrinated into believing that there are exceptions to the rule or exemptions from objective morality when it comes to the state and their agents. The state claims its right to exist and run its operation the way that it does based on deriving its rights from the people, from the general population. But when you observe the actions of the state at any level, and if you just stop to think about it and you were honest with yourself, you would have zero right to perform the exact same actions that they do on your own onto others. So for example, you and I don't have the right to coercively take the fruits of another's labor under any circumstance. Even if we felt it were to go to the most charitable of causes, it would still be immoral to take any amount or any percentage of the product of another's labor without their consent. Would that not constitute coercive aggression if you and I were to try to tax our neighbor and say, hey, look, people in the community came together and, me and my buddies are now going to provide you services around here and do a horrific job at it, by the way. And you're going to give us 10% of your earnings each month or else. Would we have the right to do that? Even if it was just a penny a month, would we have the right to do that? Of course not. Then where did Congress obtain the right to lay and collect taxes, which taxation is just a euphemism for extortion and slavery. That is all that it is. Okay, they are coercively taking the fruits of our labor, backed by the threat of aggression against our rightful property and our very physical well-being. We don't have a choice. It's not consensual. So where did they obtain this right? Being that, we're all born equal with inherent natural birthrights and no one possesses any more or any less than anyone else. They don't have this right. And there can be no such thing as the delegation of rights, which we do not inherently possess. If we individually do not have the right to do something on our own, no one does. No one does. There's a very easy, common sense way of understanding this. Just observe any action a politician takes, any action a police officer or military person takes, and then ask yourself, would you, on your own, have the right to perform those exact same actions onto anyone? If the answer is no, then they don't have that right either. Whatever you and I don't have the right to do, nobody does. There is no such thing as certain people possessing special rights or extra rights. Okay? And there's no process in which an individual or group of individuals can be granted extra rights. There is no political process or political ritual that can be done, or, a fancy document that could be written up, or any amount of people coming together and deciding it to be so. There's no amount of training or so-called education that could just magically endow someone or a group of people with extra rights. The right to perform an action which would be wrong and immoral for anyone else to perform. That's utterly ridiculous. It can only be believed to be so, but it's not real in nature itself. It's an illusory belief, a mind-controlled belief. And that is what the belief in government is. It is an illusory, mind-controlled, immoral belief system. Not saying, the people aren't real, or the buildings, or the monuments they've erected to make it look like they're holier than thou and larger than life, amongst us mere mortals, but their authority isn't real. Being that we are equal in birthrights and rights do not come from human beings, therefore no human being can ever grant rights or legitimately restrict or revoke the rights of others. The concept of authority is inherently immoral and illegitimate, and it's illusory. It's not real. There is no such thing as authority vested in man or woman. No one has any natural authority over anybody. The belief in authority is the belief that certain individuals possess more rights than others, and these individuals have acquired a higher claim over the life and property of other people, and who have the right to issue commands that others must obey or be punished. And therefore, the belief in government consists of the belief in the legitimacy of a group of people who constitute a ruling class possessing the moral right to issue decrees that the rest of the population have a moral obligation to obey or be subject to punishment by their henchmen. The belief in government and authority is the belief in the right to rule. Therefore, the belief in the legitimacy and necessity of government is the belief in the legitimacy and necessity of slavery. Government is slavery. All external government is slavery. It doesn't matter the size or scope of the government you advocate for. It could be this fucking big. It's still advocating slavery. It doesn't matter what you believe. You cannot remain morally consistent with the principles stated above and still believe in the legitimacy of authority and government. The only legitimate form of government is self-governance. That's it. And this is the belief system that has to be fucking destroyed in the minds of man if we ever want to achieve real freedom. This religious cult belief system, which it most certainly is. It is literally a religious belief, the belief in authority vested in man or woman that has been, pounded and ingrained in the minds of humankind for thousands of years, coming out of the ancient world. This comes from, the divine right to rule, the divine right of, pharaohs and kings and queens, right? Which comes from them claiming to be descendants of the so-called gods or God itself. And, even literally coming from the Bible in Romans 13, where the Roman government, who, murdered Christ, by the way, were then, ordained by God with the right to rule over the people and tax them and keep them in line. That's where this shit comes from, this dumbass belief in any human being possessing authority over others. You all bought into an old-ass religious cult belief system. It's beyond just a religion. It's a cult, because cults are a danger to those who don't follow their twisted beliefs. And that's what the belief in government is. And, you think those bloodlines who ruled for thousands of years and, who acquired all this wealth and all that power, one day just gave up their reins of control and said, I think it's time we leave our subjects be, leave them to be free to govern themselves and have the ability to prosper. We could share the land and resources with them now. There's enough to go around. And besides, they're starting to resist in parts of the world now. So I think our time is up. Let's just, gracefully back out. All that happened when people started to stop believing in the divine right of kings and realized that it was just one inbred fuckhead ruling over everyone else, and began physically resisting in parts of the world. These families just fell back into the shadows while new systems of control and slavery were formed called government. And were propagated as a system by the people, of the people, and for the people, giving people the illusion that they now had a say in a new system and could participate in the system, and that they can now choose who they want to rule them for the next few years. But it's not their ruler, of course. It's their elected representative who is to serve them. When in reality, all that happened was that imaginary authority that was vested in one inbred shithead called, a king or a queen, was then divested into a group of shitheads called government. When, after all, it's still the same families running the show, just from the shadows covertly. Because they just figured out a more effective method, a more effective slavery system where more people, would buy into the bullshit, and where people would believe that they are free and have a say in a system that is for them. It's genius. Genius. And they further ingrained the belief in authority in the minds of man, generation after generation, the more the state grew, through the love of nationalism and, through their indoctrination system. We laughingly called it education system, and every other outlet they have with all the resources and influence they have at their disposal to peddle their propaganda. These people know psychology, and they deployed every cult indoctrination technique used throughout history to get people's minds to where it's at today. They've gotten people to truly believe in the legitimacy and necessity of having a ruling class, to the point where they can't imagine life without it. They cannot imagine life without rulers. So what am I proposing? Well, what they don't want you to know. That instead of left, right, center, that there's an option called none of the above. No rulers. True anarchy. Which, is a word that has been deliberately bastardized and altered. The word anarchy simply means no rulers, from the Greek prefix an, meaning without, and the Greek noun archon, meaning master or ruler, as in a slave master. It just means no rulers or masters. That's it. It has never and does not mean chaos or no rules or every man for themselves, nor does it have any fucking thing to do with Antifa or, fake ass rebels throwing Molotov cocktails through, privately owned business storefronts. No rulers. That's all it means. And a true anarchist is one who knows that there can never be legitimacy to government or authority, because they have come to understand objective morality and self-ownership under natural law. That's what a true anarchist is. And they know that there's only one force that puts laws into existence that human beings are bound by. And that ain't any man or woman. And they don't serve two masters. They know their rights come from God. And that's what government is. It's people who want to be God and think they're God, and that they're the arbiters of right and wrong, and that they can create laws and put them into effect that human beings then have a moral obligation to obey. And that's bullshit and mind control. But so they have brainwashed people into believing that a world without them would be chaos and lawlessness and people fucking eating each other. You know, which makes me laugh. The statist logic. You know, they believe human beings can't be left to govern themselves. They don't trust people, human beings, to govern themselves, but yet they trust a subset of the same human beings that they don't trust to govern themselves to then govern millions of people. And essentially the worst of the worst who have proven to be so all throughout history. That's because only power-hungry psychopaths want to take on positions of power in life where they feel, you know, they have a say over other people's lives. But it's like, you don't trust people to govern themselves, i.e. to live in true freedom, because you feel people are flawed and can be evil and do real heinous shit. You know, I mean, what fucking species do you think comprises government? That is the exact reason why there should never be a system where those people can then rule over everyone else. Insanity. And I say this is the spiritual lesson that the universe has been beckoning humanity to learn. That all external government is slavery and always leads to total totalitarianism and death, no matter what form of government it is. You know, look, we tried it all. Communist, fascist, socialist, constitutional republic with a Bill of Rights. It always leads to total tyranny and mass death. And history has shown us this over and over and over and over again. In the 20th century, the number one cause of unnatural death was democide, which is death by government, death by your democratically elected government. Over 262 million people, that's over 250 million people murdered at the hands of their own government. That doesn't include war statistics. You know, and you think we would have learned by now. God only knows what's coming down the pipe from those shots. But all of the worst atrocities throughout human history were done in the name of authority. You know, as the great Larkin Rose said, the great philosopher of our time, I'm not scared of the Maos and the Stalins and the Hitlers. I'm scared of the tens of millions of people who hallucinate them to be authority and so do their bidding and pay for their empires and carry out their orders. I don't care if there's one loony with a stupid mustache. He's not a threat if the people do not believe in authority. Amen. You know, but everyone wants to say, oh, those were different kinds of governments. You know, you should look up how many of those governments who committed mass murder on their own population were actually democratically elected republics with a Bill of Rights. People have to get any form of external government out of their fucking minds. Look, this country started with a constitutionally limited government. Now look at us. The biggest empire in the world. And as Lysander Spooner said, and this was an anarchist from the 1800s in America, he said, whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain, that it has either authorized such a government as we've had, or it has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. The end. Fuck the Constitution. These people wipe their ass with the Constitution on a daily basis. You people sound no different than the socialists and communists who say, oh, it just wasn't done right. If we could just do it again. All forms of government were tried and always produced the same result because the premise is flawed. It's inherently immoral and illegitimate, the belief in authority and the right to rule, and will always produce the same result of total tyranny and death. So the answer is voluntary services and programs. You know, we could still have protection. We could still have roads and places of real education. instead of indoctrination, which the government themselves don't construct or provide, by the way, but we could still have all those things and greater, being that human innovation would take off to another level, being truly free. We could have all of that and greater, but based on voluntary interactions. All interactions between human beings must be voluntary, or else they're involuntary, and that makes them immoral. And government is involuntary. It is a system that is coercively funded and complied with. As George Washington said, government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. And like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Well, it's violence, actually. But look, I'm not here to give you all the answers, to all of your fears and concerns of what will be done about this, that, and the other thing in absence of government. Because everyone wants to just hear a grand master plan laid out for them, And if they don't immediately get the response they want, they're like, oh no, see, we need a ruling class. We need people violently dominating others into compliance. Because that's all you're actually saying when you say you advocate government. It's either that people own themselves and no one has a higher claim over their life and property and no one has the right to rule, and that all interactions amongst human beings should be on a voluntary basis, or you don't. And you believe that people should be violently coerced to comply with and fund certain programs and systems. You are either an anarchist or a statist. That is honestly the one true divide that exists in human consciousness. But again, I'm not here to give you my opinion on how, this could be done or how that could be done in absence of the state. I'm just trying to explain the moral principles of the matter, which you then have to work out in your own mind, on your own. And the whole point is that enough people do that and then start to grow up and fucking think for themselves and take responsibility for themselves and their communities and figure it out themselves like grown-ass adults. What could or should be done about X, Y, and Z in absence of a parasitic ruling class bossing everyone around and stealing their shit. But it needs to start by understanding natural law principles first. That will act as our foundation that we are united on as we begin to fight for our freedom. Coming to completely understand this and then teach this to others. This knowledge must come first. As Thomas Jefferson said, educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance of the preservation of our liberty. See, the founders were close, very close to anarchism, but no cigar. But we as people need to understand objective morality and what rights truly are and where they come from at a deep enough level, and then align our behaviors accordingly, by understanding what actually constitutes harm and violence objectively, and how these moral standards of human behavior don't waver and apply equally across the board to every human soul, no exceptions. And then begin to do our best each day to live in accordance with these principles by not initiating harm or violence onto other sentient beings, and by withdrawing our support from people and organizations that do, and begin calling out and taking a stand against immorality regardless of where it's coming from. Right? And when we begin to do this in large enough numbers, the world must change due to law, natural law. Again, this isn't a religious belief being propagated. I'm not saying there's a man with a beard on a cloud above who, if you don't adhere to his edicts, he's going to strike down punishments from the heavens. The God of all creation blessed us with the free will to turn this place into anything we collectively choose to. We could turn this place into an absolute paradise of true freedom, thriving innovation, and prosperity, or a prison hell of chaos, slavery, and death. It put a rule set into the fabric of reality for our optimal benefit and said, here, you have the freedom to behave and create any kind of world you want for yourselves. But if you collectively behave a certain way, you'll produce certain results. And and these laws are in place for you to observe and learn from. So you could come to understand how to create, the most optimal conditions for you as a species. What more of a fair God can there be? But that's great news, because that means that we have the power to change things. We do. And it starts with you as an individual. Everyone wants the solution. Well, go look into the mirror, because it's right there. When you come to truly understand these principles after you went through the process of working it all out in your mind on your own, and actually begin to embody a true anarchist who stands on the foundation of natural law principles, you then have the power to influence the hearts and minds of those around you, not only in your own little personal circle, but also by putting out content in your own creative right online to a wider audience. If enough individuals begin to do this and spread these ripples out in their little part of the world, freedom must manifest. So I want to leave you guys with some resources to look into to gain a deeper understanding of natural law, true anarchy, and the illegitimacy of government. These are the most brilliant minds in these subjects, in my opinion, that I could offer to you guys to look into. So I want to leave you with these 3 sources, which James will leave links to under my name on the speakers page on the website. And then, you could take it from there as far as the resources go. First and foremost, I recommend checking out Mark Passio's Natural Law Seminar. It's a 3-part, 9-hour-long presentation. I mean, yes, it's long, but it really breaks down the concepts I spoke about today in depth that I couldn't get into in just an hour-long talk. You just watch at your own pace, even if it's fucking 20 minutes at a time. But I guarantee you it will absolutely change your worldview for the better. Guarantee it. Next, I would recommend the book, The Most Dangerous Superstition by Larkin Rose. Just absolutely destroys the concept of government and authority and any statist argument for why they feel we need a state. Just fucking demolishes it. And lastly, an essay from Lysander Spooner, an anarchist from the 1800s in America. He wrote an essay called No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority. Again, getting at the inherent illegitimacy of government and the belief in authority, and how ridiculous and non-binding the fucking Constitution is. And this dude even says in that essay from the 1800s that it's all bullshit anyway, because these people are puppets for, the Rothschilds, the banking families who have the money and influence to buy them all up. So I'll leave you with those 3 resources for now, for you to start with, which can lead you to many other names, but it's all on you. But thank you all again for tuning in today. Once again, I'm Joe Murray. My website is Freedom for All down online. All of my music and my podcasts are up there for free. I have 2 albums dropping very soon, a solo album called Ultima Ratio and a joint album with the great Diesel Automatic, both dropping by the end of 2022. So go sign up to my email list on the homepage of my website, and you will receive an email notification when I upload anything to the site, which I upload everything that I do to my website first and foremost. So it's time to get our asses in gear, everyone. We could still turn things around. Time isn't on our side, but it is definitely still possible. It's only a choice that you have to make. Truth, love, and freedom for all. Peace.